my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and man, I got some stuff I want to get off my chest on today's show. I hope everybody had a great weekend first and foremost, but I've been trying to turn over a new leaf, right? I've been trying to practice what I preach on a far deeper level than ever before, and this is incredibly difficult because the topic that I'm trying to practice more empathy on, right? I always talk about having empathy on other individuals and trying to consider where they might be coming from, the shit that they're going through, right? Before you react, before you allow it to affect you. But in one place that it's, easier said than done, maybe more than anywhere else, is the world of politics, right? And many of us have beliefs or ideas that are so deeply ingrained in us that it's hard to kind of see the other side or the other person's point of view. And it's why we're living in such a divided country right now. And I've kind of been having a bit of a kind of come to Jesus moment, I think, if you will, of where is my place in that? What role am I playing in it, right? Because we see it in media and it happens on both sides. They are playing to their base, they are playing to their audience and riling up their audience in their own way, right? And of course, I have my own belief systems and I have things that I believe in, and I'm not going to change my core morals for anyone or anything. But I also think I can be a part of the problem, or I can try and be a part of the solution, right? Because at the end of the day, in some way, shape, or form, we have to find some sort of healing as a country. There's just no possible way we continue going on this path and have a life for the next generations to come, a country that's worth living in for future generations, right? So I'm trying to put on this empathy hat and see people as human. And even if I disagree with them, on just about everything, still recognizing the human in them and understanding that somewhere, along the way, we have some sort of, similar ground, even if it's just the fact that we are living, breathing human beings on planet Earth, right? So with that in mind, I wanted to do an episode kind of talking about maybe ending this division in politics, healing it, or at the very least, just sort of exploring why things are the way that they are right now. Why are we so divided? Why are, politics such a polarizing topic right now in a way that I've never seen in my lifetime, right? Where you have to choose, a side of the aisle and it represents everything that you stand for, right? And some of it for good reason. I think some of it is obviously very extreme. And I want to tackle it from both ends. And I want to try to be as fair as humanly possible here. And I'm not going to overly push my own ideas, maybe in the Mi Gente segment, I'll give you a breakdown of what I kind of feel. But when I tackle this and we do our deep dive, I want to actually reference an article that was written by a Republican, a conservative journalist, and who I thought did a great job of sort of breaking down the different sides of politics, specifically the left and the right, the Democrats versus the Republicans. So I want to reference that. We'll do a deep dive in our For the People in the Back. Like I said, in our Mi Gente segment, I'm going to kind of get a little bit more into how I am feeling and some of my opinions. Again, to be quite, upfront, I voted Democrat in the last election and, every election that I've been eligible for, that's the side that I stand with right now. But again, even if you are a Republican, I encourage you to have an open mind because that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going into this with an open mind. And again, I'm referencing an article that was written by a Republican, right? I could have easily just gone down the loop of MSNBC and pulled a blog about how crazy, Republicans are and this, that, and the third. But I actually wanted to get a real perspective from the other side, a rational one though, right? And we'll get to kind of the differences as well. For our Ask a Gringo segment, I want to get y'all's take on the idea of having certain people in your life who don't share your same ideology, and what does that look like for your relationship with them. We'll get into all of that, but first let's do this deep dive into this sort of cults of political affiliation, if you will, in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so I found this article on the Cook Political Report, and it's by a journalist named Charlie Cook, and it's called "Different Cults on the Right and the Left." And in this article, he references a really interesting other article, right? So it's an article within an article, a little journalistic inception, if you will. But it's an article written by David French, is what's being referenced by Charlie Cook. And David French is this like evangelical Christian, Harvard law trained, Iraq war veteran who now writes at places like the Dispatch and the Atlantic. And he is a self-proclaimed conservative, but a noted Trump skeptic, right? And I think this is sort of where we have to begin to designate, the differences here. I don't want to judge people just off the get because they are Republican and designate them as evil. And listen, there are a lot of things that the Republican Party as a whole has backed, including Donald Trump, that go against everything that I stand for. But again, I'm trying to put on that empathy hat and not generalize who people are based upon their political affiliation, because again, I think that gets us nowhere. It just continues with fighting. But I like this distinction of him being a Trump skeptic, right? Because to me, that is at least looking at things with a bit of rationality. Now, if you are someone who believes that, Hillary Clinton is a lizard and she's running some sort of pedophile, child sex trafficking ring, that operates out of the basement of a pizza shop in Washington, D.C., like, this probably isn't the conversation for you. I personally can't speak to you, because you just don't live in the real world. You don't live in, the world of rationality. And that's, I just don't have the time to waste, banging my head against the wall with someone who doesn't live in the same world that I live in. But anybody who's a bit more rational, you have family members who are a bit more rational, I'd like to just bring this conversation, to the table. So in a recent article that David French wrote, was for the Dispatch, and he called it, quote, "The Cult of Ideology versus the Cult of Personality." Now, French argues that the Democratic Party has moved quite decisively to the left, and the median Democrat has moved far more to the left than the median Republican has moved to the right. So they're saying that the Democratic voters have moved far more to being, radical leftists, if you will, right? To use the Republican terminology. And they've done it at a larger rate than the average Republican has moving to the extreme right. Now, this is based off of different statistics and studies that have been done. It's easy for me to brush off and say that's nonsense because of the bubble that I exist in. But I think also that's a bit short-sighted to think that just because I don't see it that way in my circle of friends, my, news that I read, doesn't mean that it may not be the real thing. And I think, to be fair, there are, I believe the statistic was like 1/3 of Republicans don't, believe in Donald Trump, right? So there are that sort of rational Republican base that exists out there that, typically votes Republican, but is having, I guess, some sort of moral dilemma when it comes to Donald Trump. And again, it would be easy for me to just write off how much more do you need to see. And if you, haven't seen that much, if you haven't seen enough for yourself to kind of make up your mind to not support the Republicans right now, I can easily sort of be someone who says, you're a part of the problem. You are a racist by affiliation, right? But again, I'm not trying to stir that pot right now. And I wasn't saying that as like a backhanded way of stirring that pot. I understand those ideas, and I think that, there is some truth in that, but I'm not trying to have that conversation right now. Again, that's more division than what I'm trying to do. But I did want to acknowledge, I know some of the counterpoints that are going to come from Democrats. Now, moving on from the Democratic Party, he then references the Republican Party, right? And it says, over in the GOP, French writes that the right's cult is different. Sure, it's beholden to Trump, but it's deeper. It's a cult of a certain personality, one that is relentlessly, personally, and often punitively aggressive. The aggression is mandatory. The ideology is malleable, right? And I think that this is definitely something that I've seen, right? And listen, I've been on, social media and specifically TikTok recently hitting that hard and putting up certain clips, and the threats of violence that I get on there, are man, a bit jarring, to think that just because you don't agree with my point of view, it leads to some sort of threat of violence. And there have been times where I've been, obviously pushing people's buttons and been that person saying, oh, these people are just stupid or they're being brainwashed, right? And again, I'm trying to move away from making those assumptions and those generalizations, because I just think that that's beneath me, and that's beneath my level of intellect, and I think all of our intellect. I'd like to have a more nuanced conversation, which is my point with this. But even times where I've just been expressing a difference of opinion and not sort of been roasting people, I've still gotten those sort of threats and that aggression, right? It's showing you that the Republican base is sort of being led with anger and aggression and the threat of violence, or at the very least, when they gaslight, is sort of taking matters into your own hands and sort of leaving that open to the judgment of the specific person on how they want to interpret it. Right now, obviously, things like social media have only contributed to things becoming more divided. Right, in the article, French references how you can explain this sort of phenomenon that we're seeing right now, that when, quote, like-minded people gather, they tend to grow more extreme. And I think the reason we're seeing division like we've never seen in my lifetime, or probably many of the people living in their lifetime, is because of social media, right? Where we don't even have to leave the house to have a conversation that sort of fires us up, right? We can go on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram. We could be in the comments arguing with people, or we can be in the comments agreeing with people. We could be on TikTok, and it's just feeding us more and more people who agree with our point of view, and it's making us more and more invested in what we believe, right? And again, I don't think it's healthy on either side. I don't think it's healthy to be a Democrat who doesn't see any other side except for, the Democratic point of view, because let's be real, the Democrats haven't been perfect either, right? The Democrats have done a lot of things that I don't personally agree with. They've fallen short in a lot of ways and haven't come through specifically for our community. Listen, if we're being completely real, Obama, was the deporter in chief, as many would call him, deported a lot of people. So there are a lot of policies that I would disagree with. And then, on the right, this is sort of where I begin to take issue and try to appeal to anybody who's rational. The issue with what's happening on the right, and as is mentioned here, is that aggression, anger, acts of violence are what is being encouraged as a means to back up your ideology, right? It's no longer let's have a debate. It's I'm going to threaten you if you don't believe in what I believe in, right? I'm going to storm the Capitol. I'm going to have a hate crime against the LGBTQ plus community. And the list goes on. I'm going to, put anti-Semitic things on large posters and protest over, a highway in Los Angeles, right? All things that happen, and all things that display this sort of anger and angst that is being stirred by one side. And again, neither side has their hands clean. But I think, again, appealing to that rational Republican out there, and sort of where I'm trying to get you to meet me in the middle, is understanding that one party is specifically pushing acts of violence, right? And that's where you have to say enough is enough, and I don't support that. That's the only way we sort of get past this, right? And again, both sides have some fuckery, but I'm just trying to appeal to anybody who is rational on the other side of the aisle, who, is sort of at a crossroads, sort of showing you that you cannot reward this behavior, or it is just going to cause more and more turmoil for our country, and for all of us as human beings living here. Now, when it comes to the cult of personality, right, which is what David French refers to Republicans as, right? Again, it's the cult of ideology for the Democrats and the cult of personality for Republicans. French writes that in 2008, he and his wife formed a group to help persuade evangelical Christians that Mitt Romney was, quote, the best man for the world's most difficult job. He says, in our conversations, we emphasize his integrity, his decency, and his competence. And then he goes on to say, talk about missing your audience. Turns out that each of those virtues turned out to be less important than pugilism or aggression. But even then, the message for much of the grassroots was clear. Hit harder. No, hit even harder. Lack of aggression was perceived as lack of effort, a lack of will to win. Mitt's primary competitors weren't necessarily more conservative than him, but they were more aggressive, right? And he's talking about how he is reaching out to fellow Christians and appealing to what should be their moral code, their moral compass, right? But they're willing to ignore that because they want somebody who's going to go out there yelling and be more aggressive, like they said, to be out there publicly fighting and causing a stir, rather than someone who is calmly going to talk about policy and what they believe in as a human being, right? And in this article, they go on to say it's a phenomenon that existed on the right before Trump and will likely endure long past his era. But Trump was able to supercharge it. Quote, if you pay little attention to talk radio, French writes, you're likely missing the extent of devotion to the cult of aggression. The same thing goes for the top-rated television shows and websites. The same personality characteristics persist. It's pugilist almost all the way down. Reasoned voices are hard to find. And if you're like me, I had to Google what pugilist meant. It means fighter. Just keeping it 100 with you guys. Anybody's following along at home. So what he's saying here is this, that what Trump ended up doing was taking the need or the want or what people perceived as their need for a more aggressive politician as far as the Republicans were concerned, and he supercharged it, right? He became the most aggressive politician. He became the bully, right? And for these people who wanted more of a fight out of their candidates and who perceive bullying and aggression and fighting as a sign of somebody's devotion to their political party, to them, this is why they are so obsessed with somebody like Donald Trump. And I'm having a bit of a breakthrough as I talk about this, right? A revelation. Because you have people who literally will say Trump is the greatest president of all time. I love him. He can't do any wrong. He needs to be here. He's a real American. All of the above, right? These real devotees of Donald Trump. And for a long time, I didn't really get it. But again, when you look to this idea, this notion that Republicans were starving for a fighter, somebody who was going to be a bully to the Democrats, who many Republicans felt like were bullying them, right? Who felt like liberal media was dominating and Republican voices were being silenced and being bullied themselves, right? So they want somebody who's going to fight and be the ultimate fighter. And Donald Trump, was shit talking his way to the White House, and that's what they wanted, right? And that's why they love him, because they see that anger and that angst that Donald Trump has and expresses, and him tearing people down and talking shit. They view that as a sign of his dedication to the people who support the Republican Party, a sign of his dedication to America. So, of course, to them, everybody else doesn't give a fuck about this country because they're not fighting as hard as he is, right? The aggression, again, is being interpreted as his willingness to fight for this country and save this country, right? And that is sort of where I think people are beginning to get steered in the wrong direction, right? It's no longer who has the best policy, who has the best moral grounding, who fits our conservative values. It is who is going to be the most extreme person, one-upping the other one as far as expressing aggression and tearing down the other side. It's why somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, has risen to prominence, or Lauren Boebert in Colorado, right? Because they will call people out by name. They will talk shit, even if it's not true. Their base will eat it up because, again, they are viewing that aggression, that willingness to fight, as a sign of their dedication to their job, right? And the reality is, it's a dedication of creating a clip that gets them on television, gets them talked about, right? But that's not how the base is seeing it. And listen, I don't think the Republican Party is sort of alone in this notion. Again, to be fair, I think the Democrats have taken this other approach where they sort of have just become like this. Many, not all, but many of the outlets, have become like a daytime talk show where they literally are just ripping on the Republican, candidates and Donald Trump and things like that, and finding ways to sort of create like this satire of roasting the other party. And listen, are a lot of the things that they're saying true? Are these people, really a threat to democracy? Absolutely. When they don't believe in solidifying a presidential election that has, gone through all of the possible court systems, and has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court, when they don't believe in recognizing our democracy, and will just believe the words of a candidate and take that as the ultimate truth, yeah, that has to be called out. That has to be talked about, right? Because that is, no way for our country to operate where we don't live in the world of what is actually fact, right? But it doesn't need to turn into the shade room. It doesn't need to turn into Wendy Williams. I often feel like I'm watching that when I look at somebody like Joy Reid on MSNBC, and she's a brilliant woman, went to Harvard, all of the above. But it feels like I'm watching a gossip entertainment show, and it's no different than somebody like Tucker Carlson, who's using his creepy little laugh, as a means to roast people on his end, right? And I think that's the issue that we're having in this country right now, right? Where it is, is not about what is actually right. It's just about who can rip into the other one better at the end of the day. And again, I think what these statistics have shown, what these people who have are part of the Republican Party or vote Republican are talking about, is that policy, facts, actual integrity, moral integrity, conservative values are being thrown out the window because people just want somebody who's essentially going to be a bully at this point. And that's why the Republican Party is operating in that way, because it has worked for them, And again, this is my appeal to the other side is that really what you want in your leader? Somebody who's good at talking shit, and is just fighting for the sake of fighting? Or do you actually want somebody that represents your values, right? Herschel Walker, again, in Georgia, is another example of this. How many allegations this man had about alleged abortions and things like that? Yet you have Christians who are, fighting against a woman's right to choose, saying that they support Herschel Walker. And again, it's just because he talks shit and he's backed by Donald Trump, the ultimate shit talker, right? Like, this can't be your sort of litmus test for how you vote, right? I don't care what side of the aisle you fall on. If you are just voting for somebody because they are good at roasting another person, we're going to be in a really dark place as a country if these people continue to get in office. Again, somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is all about QAnon and conspiracy theories and all this nonsense, is somebody running around in Congress, right? Has the ability to vote on things and create bills and is representing people. What has she actually done for her constituents? What policies has she proposed that actually do anything for people, right? Nothing. It's all about her getting clout, and her way of getting clout was being a Republican extremist that got into office, right? And was able to be a bully once again. Why do you think guns are so prevalent in Republican ads? This is what people have to wake up to. The idea of this cult of MAGA and the Republican Party, they are galvanizing you by basically just giving you what you want. You want somebody who's going to fight back because you feel like your side of the aisle has been disenfranchised, your voice has been silenced. And sure, you can make an argument for that. But just somebody who is going to talk shit on camera, that is not enough of a reason to elect them to be a representative for what is supposed to be the greatest country in the world. And again, we need people who live in the world of facts. We need people who are rational thinkers. These are supposed to be some of the most intelligent human beings to be walking our country, representing us. And then you look at, again, last example I'm going to pull is Governor Ron DeSantis, who has been in court recently, and his lawyers had to define what the word woke meant to them. And they said, quote, the belief that there are systemic injustices in America, in American society, and the need to address them. So they are saying that woke is bad, right? The idea that we need to address systemic injustices in America is bad. How can anybody make an argument against that? The facts are there. We need to stop sweeping things under the rug. And again, if you are a rational human being, regardless of the aisle that you fall on, the facts are the facts. History is history. This country was built on the backs of people of color, of indigenous people, of slaves. Land was taken away from indigenous people. The South and everybody prospered off of having free labor from slaves, right? And they were never given true equality when they were freed. They didn't get their 40 acres and a mule. They were kept out of other conversations. Segregation, happened, redlining, all these different things that has affected the Black community for generations, has affected people of color for generations, and you can't deny that, right? That's a part of our history. Is it a dark history? Of course, but we have to acknowledge it as rational human beings, regardless of your political affiliation. You have to acknowledge a real history, right? That's where it begins. That's how we get to a real place of healing. Maybe you disagree with, the solutions to these problems, but you first have to just acknowledge that there is, in fact, a problem, right? Redlining was a real thing. People of color were kept out of certain areas, right? And they were kept into urban areas. And that's why you have such a high population of people of color, Black and brown, living in urban areas. And those are the ones that were underfunded, right? And that were the least taken care of and least maintained by their government officials, right? And again, that is racism. That holds people back. That disenfranchises them when they're in the worst schools, dealing with the worst conditions, the least amount of funding. They are not going to be able to have a leg up to catch up to their white counterparts who, once again, have generations of a head start. And I'm not saying as a white human being, you have to feel guilty for being white, but you have to understand that whiteness, colonization, has had a profound impact on people of color around the world, but specifically in this country and how this country was founded, built, and maintained from the beginning until we live right now. Race has been a long-standing part of how things have been determined in this country. And again, you don't have to feel guilt. Nobody is saying that you have to be ashamed of being white, but we have to all think rationally. And to me, that is sort of where I extend my hand, where we can meet in the middle. Let's just have a rational discussion about how this country was built, how wealth was built, and who was sort of left out of the ability to create wealth for a very long time, and they're now just playing catch up, right? Let's just have these rational conversations, not about anger and not about who can shit talk the most, but about facts and how we can repair the dark history of this country, right? That's all I'm asking for. I'm just asking for somebody to rationally look at history, and I think that is a real thing that we can do as long as people who are living in the real world and not believing in conspiracy theories and nonsense, as long as they're willing to have a conversation based around facts. That's all that I am asking for when it comes to this idea of, erasing this division that we see. Now, with that said, I feel like I kind of went off on a tangent of my own thoughts on this. I'll give you a bit of a preview of our Mi Gente segment. I'll probably keep Mi Gente a little shorter today for that reason. But let's talk a bit about kind of my own journey, my own kind of real feelings about this type of stuff. We'll continue that conversation in our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, so for me, again, it's finding empathy for those who I don't agree with, right? And who, have this sort of charged opinion that it's charged on both sides. Their opinion, puts me in a certain mood, and in my opinion, puts them in a certain mood, right? There are a lot of nuances to things that we believe or things that we're all sort of supporting, right? How do I find empathy for somebody who is supporting a political party that is wishing the worst for my people, right? For people of color. And again, I'm not co-signing anybody's terrible behavior or disgusting or racist thoughts. I'm simply just saying we got to find some sort of middle ground to be able to come to the table as human beings, right? And I think there has to be a recognition of why are people so angry? Why do people feel so disenfranchised, right? Why is it that much of the Republican Party from these conversations, these statistics, why are they feeling like they need somebody who is a fighter? Why are they so angry? And as a whole, why are all of us so attached to our political ideology? Why is it our identity, right? And I think for people of color, it's a bit more difficult to separate that because laws and who's in power has a direct impact on our lives and our safety. But in general, why do we define so much of our identity over our political affiliation, right? And I think as a whole, people in general are just lacking a why, right? They're lacking a purpose in this life. And this reminds me of the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. If you haven't read it, it's incredible. I suggest it for everybody. But in that book, he says, quote, "To be happy, we need something to solve," right? And I think that's human nature. So, for me, my work keeps me incredibly busy. There's always an issue to solve. My studio has been a constant build out for the last few months. Every single day, I'm still doing something to finish it, right? I'm prepping for a podcast. I have to solve the problem. What's the next episode going to be about? I'm trying to be a voice for my community. So that's an issue I'm trying to solve. What do I see as lacking from my community? And all of the above, right? I wake up every day with a purpose, with a why, at the simplest form, recognizing that I want to communicate with people. I want to be connected to people as my why. And I've done a great deal of work of trying to connect to that. And finding my why is something new for me that I've recently been like honing in on. I will maybe do an episode about that in the future. But again, I've recognized that in order for me to feel fulfilled, for me to feel happy, I have to feel like I am a part of something, like I am fighting for something. I am solving a problem, each and every day, and solving one that I enjoy kind of going after, right? One that means something to me. So I think for a lot of people, who don't have that why, who don't have a real sense of community or fulfillment in their work or their home life, I think that they are all searching, many at least, are searching for something to latch onto that gives them that sense of fulfillment, gives them a problem to solve, gives them a place that they can call home, a group of people that feels like a community to them, that they can share like-minded ideas amongst, right? And I think the pandemic was a perfect example as to why kind of a lot of people were radicalized and conspiracy theories and this, that, and third. People were lonely and they're looking for something to latch onto. And Facebook groups and social media gave them people to interact with on a regular basis that shared a certain ideology as them, right? I think it's no different than why some people are so obsessed with church and religion and things like that. And I'm not here to talk down on anybody's, religious beliefs, but I think church does provide a sense of community. You go to the same place each and every week to hear a message. You see the same faces, you share ideas amongst one another. I'm sure you have conversations with people. You enter the room knowing that these people, at least in some sort of way, share a similar mindset and moral value code to you. And there's a sense of comfort there, feeling like you're not alone, right? But I think for a lot of people in this country who feel disenfranchised, the middle class, the blue collar workers, who feel like they're not being seen, who feel like they're not making enough money, who feel like their jobs are being taken away, by tech or whomever, right? They feel like their opportunities are dwindling away and they're just angry for whatever reason it might be. They feel like their life is not what it should be, what it's supposed to be. They're looking for somebody to blame it on, right? And I think that's where a lot of that anger that we talk about comes from, right? They feel like their needs are not being met and that they've been bullied into being silenced, that the people they look up to have been bullied into being silenced, right? And then they're looking for that hero, right? Who's that person who's going to stand up to them? Who's the bully that's going to stand up to their bullies, right? And, you enter somebody like Donald Trump, who is, a great marketer and a great shit talker and a great conversationalist, generally speaking, when it comes to just finding ways to make things sound interesting, right? He enters the room and they suddenly feel seen. They feel like somebody is fighting for them. And then now he's also giving them a purpose, right? He's saying that if you don't vote for me, or you don't support the Republican Party, that this country is going to be taken over and your life is going to be completely miserable, right? Everything as you know it is going to be gone. The left is radical communists or socialists, and they want to, take more taxes from you, more this, more that. And it doesn't matter if it's based upon fiction or fact. It's still coming from somebody who you feel like sees you, so you have undying loyalty to them, right? And even as Democrats, where we have such a visceral hate for Donald Trump and those who support him, we now are getting riled up by people who are roasting anybody who's Republican, who are roasting Donald Trump, who are fact checking him and he's wrong, and we're getting obsessed with that, and we are getting obsessed with arguing with other people, and we feel like they are so unintelligent because they're following things that actually aren't true, and we now have to correct them, and it's frustrating because they're so quote unquote dumb, right? We're all being like stirred in this giant pot to sort of fight amongst one another, and who really is benefiting at the end of the day? Politicians, the media, who is exploding right now as far as political news and things like that. Politics has now become a part of pop culture, so pop culture paychecks are coming in there for a lot of these newscasters. People like Tucker Carlson are getting ratings like they've never seen before, where they're the top show in late night all of a sudden, right? So they're the ones benefiting from it. So of course they are stirring the pot, where we as the everyday person who truly have the most to lose, we're getting played for as a fool, where we're just fighting amongst each other incoherently for no real reason. And again, this doesn't, matter. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you fall on. I think we're all sort of a part of the pot that's being stirred right now. But again, you have to just live in the rational real world. And my unbiased opinion is that while the Democrats are a lot of talk and not enough action, a lot of placating, a lot of kind of dangling that carrot on a stick, on the flip side of that, the Republicans are just trying to one up each other to continue this sort of aggression and bringing out aggression in their constituents, because they know that's what helps them maintain power. And I think that that's what is the scary part. And I've said that 1,000,001 times. You have one party who's literally willing to do anything to maintain that power. Again, look at Donald Trump. No real proof or evidence. There were recounts. There were court cases, multiple states all over the country. Nobody found widespread voter fraud. But just because he said it, he now has people committing acts of violence, things that are treason, right? No matter what way you spin it, what happened on January 6th was treason. And if you are a rational person, regardless of the aisle that you fall on, that was treason. You can't look away from that. People were assaulted. Police officers were assaulted. They broke through into a sacred place in this country. They were chanting things like "Hang Mike Pence." Again, I don't care if you have traditionally voted Republican. All I'm asking for you to be is a rational human being at this point, right? That's where we have to kind of find that middle ground again. As divisive as the world that we live in is, it's only going to get worse if we don't begin to have real, honest conversations with ourselves, those around us, and also try and have conversations with each other who, maybe we don't agree on things, but we all are just rational human beings trying to figure it out, right? And that's what I'm, again, appealing to. Some people are just going to be lost causes. Some people are going to believe, again, lizard people, JFK Jr. is not dead, blah, 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 all these crazy conspiracy theories, right? I can't speak to those people. But if you're a rational human being living in the real world who is, cognizant of real things, I'm asking you to really be, open, and actually both sides to being open. And let's just put out facts. Let's just do some fact checking, have a fact-based conversation. That's the fucking start right there, right? And again, when it comes to the idea of empathy, for me, and what I would encourage others, rather than quickly writing others off, because again, that's only going to continue the division. What is it about the messaging that is striking for them, right? These people who are unable to sort of look away from somebody like Donald Trump, what is really connecting for them, right? And again, if you're able to see them as somebody who feels like they have no purpose in life, like they are disenfranchised in some sort of way, I think you can begin to maybe let that guard down and have a conversation. Now, again, they have to be a rational human being who is willing to have a conversation with you. They have to meet you halfway. It takes two to tango. But my point is, I think all of us have to be able to look at each other as human beings and find the empathy in some sort of way, understanding that we're not all crazy for the beliefs that we have, regardless of what side of the aisle you fall on, right? Understanding that we all believe what we believe for a certain reason, right? And that if we are all of sound mind and body, we should be able to sit down and have a real conversation and meet maybe somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be so left or so right. Again, I think empathy goes a long way. And I think for those people who have found themselves maybe voting against what were their true morals or their true interests, rethink who have you been supporting over the last few years? What do they truly stand on? What do you actually like about them, right? If you were a Trump supporter, do some fact checks about him. Go all over the internet, look at different, trusted publications and do some real fact checks. If you want to look at politics, right? Don't just take what they're telling you and believe it as the gospel, right? About inflation and gas prices and all this kind of stuff. Look into the fact that certain gas companies are talking about having record profits in this last quarter, right? That's not Joe Biden raising the gas prices and they're getting record profits. No, that's that's these gasoline companies price gouging us and recording record profits. We should all be pissed at them and not sitting here trying to blame Joe Biden for some sort of unbased issue. Again, inflation is a global thing, right? Everybody's blaming Joe Biden for inflation in this country right now. And I'm not saying he's perfect in all he's done, but inflation is a global problem right now based upon the pandemic. Like, dig a little bit deeper than what's being told to you. Multiple countries around the world, high-powered countries like ours, are experiencing inflation as a result of the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic. And we actually are experiencing less of it than many countries around the world. So what you have to look at is these talking points that they're giving, that they're scaring you with, are not all fact-based. And all I'm asking, once again, dig a little deeper. If I can break through to anybody who doesn't believe the same thing as I do, just dig a little bit deeper into the talking points that they're giving you, right? What are the real facts? Who are the people to really blame? Is this really just an American Joe Biden problem? Or is this something that's literally happening to the global economy, right? And the last thing I'll say on that, because I know one response that I got on TikTok was, I don't care about the global economy, I care about the US. We live in a country where roughly a third of everything that we consume or purchase is imported. So the global economy and other countries suffering from inflation and having to raise their prices, that affects us, because when we import it, guess what? We, the consumer, get passed on all of the extra money that was added to our normal goods. So the global economy matters for us here in the US. But again, that is not something that somebody like Tucker Carlson is going to tell you. Any of these candidates running for office, they're just going to tell you it's Joe Biden's fault that you're paying more money for items than you did before, and ignoring the fact that this is a global problem and the consumer is always going to be the one who has to deal with an issue from something like inflation, because these companies are not going to take a hit. They're not going to take the loss. They're going to pass the buck onto us, the consumer. And these gas companies, knowing that we're willing to pay higher prices for gas, are going to do their best to keep the prices high and price gouge us, and then be able to report record profits for them and their board members, right? Again, it's bigger than just the president. Please dig a bit deeper. That's the conversation I would love to have with people. Again, appealing with that sort of empathy and giving you the consideration that you're a human. I'm not going to say you're an idiot, right? I don't want to sit here and offend people. I literally am just asking, dig a little bit deeper into some of the talking points that are being thrown to you, and then make a decision on what you believe or what you don't agree with as well. Now, I kind of blacked out for a second on my soapbox there. We've been kind of getting around here, and I'm hoping that I'm also just giving people some advice on how to deal with anybody in your life who you may disagree with politically or you feel like has gone off the rails. I thought my guest last week, Maria Diaz, had a great story about her friend who her father voted for Trump, and they just had a civilized sort of email back and forth, fact checking some of the things that were reasons why he supported Donald Trump or didn't support Joe Biden. And I think we should all be able to have that rational conversation. We all just kind of have to come back down to baseline and stop with the polarization and just look at each other as human beings and just talk about facts. Calmly talk about the facts. Now, with that said, I want to get y'all's take on a question that I posed on Instagram relating to what we're talking about today in our Ask a Gringo segment.
Ask a Gringo!
I have a question. All right, so for our Ask a Gringo segment, I simply just ask people, are you able to stay friends with someone who has a different political affiliation, or, if it's family, are you able to have them as a part of your life? So I got a bunch of responses. I'm going to try to get to a few here. Let's start with @NaniRenee. They say, used to be able to very easily until Trump happened. Now I find it very difficult. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about today, right? This polarization that has happened where there's no more middle, right? You have to either be left or right, and you have to be all in on what you believe in, and unwilling to see the other side. And to a degree, I get it, because I think there is so much at stake. I think somebody like Trump is divisive by nature. It's by design. That's how he was able to win. Creating division was a part of his strategy, right? Again, we kind of referenced that article where somebody like Mitt Romney, they were trying to appeal to people's Christian values and morality and things like that. And Donald Trump gave them this sort of shit talking fighter, and supercharged it, right? And amongst that, by becoming a bully, you polarize people, right? And that's sort of why I understand kind of the idea that Trump has made it very difficult to make that distinction. I know for me, you know, I've grown up with family members who are Republican, and granted, I was a bit younger. I didn't, think much of it, but I think in today's day and age, the idea of maintaining yourself as a Republican, as a Trump supporter, does have a lot of implications, specifically for people of color. When you talk about, all that he said about our Mexican brothers and sisters, as being rapists and drug dealers and all that kind of stuff, and in general, things he said about people of color, has made it really difficult. But I think we sort of do have to once again find that empathy if we're ever going to try to get this thing back down to zero, right? Get back down to some normalcy in our country. We're going to have to kind of put some of that resentment behind us and just start having real conversations. Now let's see. Oh, this is a great example. I'm not even gonna shout out his Instagram handle because I don't want to give him any clout, because this guy just follows me just as a means to like jump in my comments talking random bullshit about Donald Trump, or calling me a communist, or whatever other nonsense that he spews. But his simple response was Trump 2024. And again, this shows you that just like dickhead mentality of like a high school bully who is just like, fuck your feelings, Trump 2024, right? Like that's so much of a lot of the Trump base. And, as he is the representative of the Republican Party, it's hard not to throw every Republican in that same polluted bathwater as him, right? Especially when you have, again, people like this make it really difficult, right? I would love to rip into him. I would catch myself. I'm trying to show some empathy, but again, because it is divisive by design, right? It is this bullying mentality, and this sort of just weird fucking obsession with this human being. And again, when you break it down to people wanting to feel like somebody was fighting for them, I get it from that perspective. But yeah, it's this obsession. I don't want to say weird. This obsession with this human being that they themselves are being co-signed as a bully, right? Like he makes it okay to bully others and to force your opinion down the throats of other people. And they deserve to be attacked if they don't believe what you say, right? And I think that's where it becomes difficult to have those conversations with anybody who does support somebody like Trump or the Republican Party, because again, a vote for that does tend to co-sign people like this and that bullying mentality. Now, last one I'm gonna read here is let's see, at VietDDog21. He says, absolutely, we all have to be able to respect others' views, whether we agree or not. Everyone comes at it from a different perspective or angle. The biggest part is being able to listen to the other side without being closed-minded and seeing from other perspectives why they feel the way they do. Unfortunately, that's the hard part for most. And yeah, I think, I agree that we have to be able to be open to other people's perspectives. And this is where I get torn, right? And I'm still on that journey of really being open and being empathetic and trying to come to the table with anybody who is willing to have a real conversation, not just like a screaming match or threatening somebody. It's tough because the implications of supporting somebody like Donald Trump, those I should say have real, like the support of Donald Trump has real implications on my community, the community that I stand so proudly for, right? That I try and be a voice and a beacon of light for, right? My people are the ones that he was calling rapists and drug dealers, which led to then more hate crimes, and my support of the LGBTQ community and the and the hate, and rhetoric that is being spewed amongst the trans and gay community that is leading to violence against them. As a result, all of that, makes it really difficult to be open to hearing somebody else's perspective, because at the end of the day, you're supporting hate, you're supporting racism, right? Now, again, I'm not there completely yet, but I think that is the right thing. We have to be open to hearing their perspective. And even if their perspective is full of nonsense, right? Because the idea that like all this trans hate that's happening is because it's like being transgender is like a gateway to pedophilia. It's not real. It's not based in reality. It's just fear mongering that's being pushed on you. I think we have to be willing to dig a bit deeper and get past our own anger and justifiable anger. And again, I'm still working on this, but wonder, why does this human being believe this so adamantly, right? Why was the shooter, the mass shooter at the club in Colorado, why was his father more angry at the fact that he was at a gay club than the fact that he, shot and killed 5 people, injuring, almost 20 others, right? Like, that's the question I think we really need to be digging deep to, because that's the only way we heal, right? Why are people feeling so seen and validated by these issues being brought up? What is it saying about, what they're lacking in their life? And again, I'm not completely there yet, but I'm just providing, I think that's the real solution. Being able to come to the table and ask the deeper question, why do you believe that, your livelihood is being threatened by the Democrats so deeply, right? Like, what specific thing are the Democrats doing or proposing that is making you feel like your livelihood is threatened, right? And again, asking the question, why do you resonate so deeply with who you do, right? Why are you blindly voting for Democrat? Why are you blindly voting Republican? And those who are so extreme on either side, why? Where does that extremism come from that you can't see anything else but that? And again, it is really tough because you can't help but feel like anybody who supports someone like Donald Trump, doesn't give a fuck about me or where I come from or my people or my own safety, right? And I think that is a very real feeling, a very real fear. And if we truly broke that down into the words that he said and many of the things that have happened as a result, I think we are incredibly justified, and there is some factual, backing as to why we would be scared and should be concerned of that kind of rhetoric. But I do think there is, certain people who are believing certain things because it's striking a chord for them, and it might not be the racism that is striking a chord for them. For some people, obviously, it very much is, right? But for the rational person, again, what is it that's striking a chord? What messaging, what attitude is striking a chord for you, and why, right? Because for some people, they're not co-signing the racist stuff, but they're just, I guess, really charged up by the other stuff that's being said, right? And so much so that they can sort of turn a blind eye to the blatant racism and hate and bigotry, right? And again, I'm not saying that that's correct, but I'd be curious as to what about the other thing gets you so hyped up that you can sort of blindly ignore this other stuff, right? And again, those are the conversations. And I feel like I'm stealing from what could be a good conclusion, Stu. So I'm gonna take a pause there. Thank you to everybody that participated in this conversation at DJ Dramos on Instagram. I do this for each and every episode. I'm on a roll right now, so let's go into conclusions, Stu. Tie everything we talked about in a neat little bow.
Time for conclusions, Stu.
So I think what I was getting at there, I'm not going to overly drag this out or anything like that. But what I was getting at there is, I think there's always a deeper question to be asked, right? I think the idea of empathy in what I'm talking about is not jumping to snap judgments fueled by anger or frustration, right? It's very easy to see somebody's comment on TikTok and be like, this person's a fucking idiot. This person is a racist. This person doesn't live in the real world, right? It's very easy to label them as a weirdo, a crazy person, whatever it might be. But I think, again, the only real place of healing comes from wanting to ask the secondary question, right? To push past what's on the surface and to sort of understand where it's coming from, right? And again, I think certain people are maybe, I don't want to say long gone, but, for the time being are not worth my time as far as having a conversation with, right? Somebody like Kanye West and all that he's been saying. I'd be interested to hear what is the deeper layer that is making this man spew hate and go against everything he's ever stood for. But at the same time, I'm not going to waste my time, wanting to hear that conversation from him right now. Or, if I was somebody with a large platform, I wouldn't be wanting to give him that platform to figure this out. Like, he needs to do some internal work. And then maybe, we can have that conversation hypothetically, right? So I think there are people like that. But again, if we're really going to try to get this back down to zero, get this back down to baseline, we have to be willing to ask those second and third questions, right? To dig a bit deeper into why people are so fired up in the way that they are, behind whatever it might be, what the reason that they support this person, what about this person has them so fired up that they are literally basing their entire identity around the support of this political party or this political figure, right? And I think that's where that empathy begins. I'm not completely there yet. I'm doing my best to not respond to like the trolls on social media. And that's kind of my practice right now, as hard as it is, and some of the frustrating things that I read. I just don't think anything comes from us arguing in the comments of a TikTok video or an Instagram post or anything like that. But again, my appeal is to those who genuinely want to get to a place of healing and who want to sort of solve this division that's happening, regardless of the aisle that you fall on, and truly just dig deeper as to why I feel the way I do and why you feel the way you do, right? Those are the conversations I'm longing to have and to propose for others to have. And again, I'm not sure if I'm completely at the point in my sort of journey that I'm able to have that and not feel some type of way, by the things that certain people stand by and support, again, because of what it means for my community and the threats that it has posed for my community. I'm not sure if I can completely just sort of block that out of my head and just have a conversation, but I do know that is where healing comes from. Healing is on the other side of that anger and that resentment that I have for that person, right? And healing is where those second and third questions come from, as far as the level of somebody's beliefs. And again, I'm still a work in progress. I'm not sure if I'm there yet, but I'm proposing that idea, and I'm challenging everybody who listens to this to try and have that sort of openness to wanting to dig just a bit deeper, understanding that that's where I think the healing begins, and hopefully we can one day kind of get to that place again as a country, and while again it's never been perfect or maybe even great for people of color in America. I think the fact that we always swept hard conversations like this under the rug is why we are where we are. And again, it's sitting down at the table, having those hard conversations, not in anger or resentment, but in genuine curiosity as to the other person or other side's experience. That's where the real healing that we have never done as a country will come from. And that's sort of the whole idea that I'm talking about when it comes to, healing this division that we see in America and in politics as a whole right now. Now, with that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in. And I hope that made sense. I think this is just, again, like I was taking a walk with my dog and I thought about this topic, today, and I just kind of allowed myself to riff on it. And I hope that it connects with a lot of people. I know that I'm looking to be more of the positive change and more of, a change agent and somebody who can maybe heal others, by providing some sort of empathy and not just be another person in media stirring the pot and coming up with, witty one-liners to, roast the other side. Like, I want to really have conversations and, get us back into a better place as a country and as human beings in general. So that's what I'm challenging myself to do right now. But anyway, again, thank y'all so much for tuning in. We'll be back on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. Dramos.com for all your merch. And anybody who's been reviewing, liking, subscribing, man, thank you so much. We've been getting some of the statistics back from this last year. We had crazy numbers on places like Spotify and of course Apple Podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And all of which have given us support on their front pages. Apple Podcasts, of course Spotify, Amazon Music, the iHeartRadio app. Everybody's been really supportive. On Spotify, I had posted this for people who follow me on Instagram, but like we were in the top 5% of most followed podcasts and most shared podcasts in the entire world globally, which is insane to me. So thank y'all for that support and like subscribing, leaving reviews, all that stuff matters. Again, that put us into that top 5% and it begins to open the doors for more opportunities for this podcast to grow. So if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. It really does help out. I genuinely appreciate it. And man, I'll catch y'all on Thursday. Until then, stay safe, man. Try to wear that empathy hat, man, and see how it fits. And I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.